Betrayal does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand attention with dramatic gestures. Instead, it quietly whispers. It gently pats your shoulder, falsely reassuring, "We will be right back," and then leaves without looking back. I stood motionless in the terminal at Omaha International Airport, watching my parents walk away, abandoning my grandfather, their own father, as if he were a burden. The sting of their betrayal hit my chest so hard that it became difficult to breathe the stale, recycled air. My name is Emily Thompson. At the age of 20, I discovered the true price of love and what it means to make a choice different from those who raised you. In our polished Omaha home, I had always been the ideal daughter. Straight A's proudly displayed on the refrigerator, piano recitals performed flawlessly, a scholarship to college that made my cardiologist father shine with pride at those country club dinners. I embodied everything they expected: quiet, obedient, and invisible whenever it was convenient for them. However, there was one person in our seemingly perfect family who never quite fit the carefully crafted image, and that was my grandfather, Henry. While my parents gauged love by accomplishments, social status, and recognition, my grandfather measured it differently. For him, love was found in Sunday afternoons spent feeding ducks and bedtime stories that extended far beyond my official lights-out time. He was the only one who looked me squarely in the eyes and said, "Emily, you do not need to earn love. You just are." I was 7 years old when he first started calling me Izzy, a special nickname that belonged only to us. While my parents attended their never-ending country club meetings, Grandpa would take me to Elmwood Park. We would sit under a towering elm tree near the lake, and in his gravelly voice, he would read "The Wind in the Willows," occasionally stopping to point out a cardinal or ask what I thought Mole was feeling. His hands told their own stories, scarred and worn from 3 decades of teaching shop class at Central High School, yet they were incredibly gentle when turning the pages of our shared books. "Tell me something beautiful you saw today, Izzy," he would say during our walks, and somehow I always had an answer. A butterfly resting on Mrs. Peaton's roses, morning light sparkling on dewdrops clinging to our fence, the neighbors' wind chimes singing softly in the breeze. As I got older, those Sunday visits became my refuge. High school brought overwhelming pressure, keeping a perfect 4.0 GPA, winning piano contests, and crafting flawless college applications. Whenever the weight became unbearable, I would sneak upstairs to Grandpa's room. He never asked about grades or essays. He simply smiled and said, "Tell me something beautiful you saw today." And in those precious moments, I could breathe again. Then Alzheimer's started to take him away little by little. At first, it was small slips. He would call me Izzy 3 times in a row, each time surprised I was still there. He would lose himself in stories from many years ago, repeating the same army tale or a first date memory with Grandma, as if it were breaking news. My father grew more and more frustrated. My mother started speaking about Grandpa as if he were no longer alive, even though he sat right there at our dinner table. I recall the night when I truly realized what we were losing. I was 16, coming home after a harsh day filled with SAT preparation and college interviews. I found Grandpa standing in our driveway covered with snow at midnight, dressed only in thin pajamas and slippers, holding a watering can. "The roses need water," he said when I walked over, his breath forming little clouds in the cold February air. "Your grandmother will be upset if I don't care for her roses." Grandma had been gone for 5 years. The roses were gone as well when my mother updated the garden. I carefully took the watering can from his shaking hands. "Grandpa, it's Emily. It's night now. Let's go inside where it's warm." He blinked at me, confusion filling his eyes before understanding shone through like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Emily, am I dreaming?" "No, Grandpa," I answered, wrapping my coat around his shoulders. "You are just remembering." That became our secret phrase. When the present reality faded and past memories seemed more real than the moment we were in, I would gently remind him, "You are just remembering." My parents called it a temporary phase. Late at night, when they thought I was asleep, I would hear them quietly talking about nursing homes. Memory care units vary, and finding the perfect fit for everyone can be challenging. However, the thought of Grandpa being surrounded by unfamiliar faces who would not recognize his little quirks was unbearable. They would never know that when nervous, he hummed classic Sinatra tunes, or that he always stirred his tea exactly 3 times before taking the first sip. So, in my own way, I became his guardian. I spent evenings sitting beside him, reading aloud from the very books he used to share with me. Titles like The Secret Garden, Charlotte's Web, and The Wind in the Willows filled those quiet moments. Although he sometimes struggled to follow the stories, those times felt like uncovering hidden treasures. His eyes would suddenly brighten with recognition, as if a long-locked door within him had been opened again. During the summer following my high school graduation, we found ourselves in our backyard under the large maple tree. Inside, my parents hosted yet another cocktail party, but I had slipped away to the peaceful spot where Grandpa spent most afternoons now. That day, he looked at me with the clearest eyes I had seen in a long time and said, "Izzy, when they stop seeing me, promise me you will not." My throat tightened as I replied, "I could never stop seeing you, Grandpa." He reached over and gently placed his worn hand over mine. Then he added, "When the time comes, you will know what to do." At that moment, I had no idea what he meant. His words lodged themselves deep in my heart like a promise I did not yet understand, but I felt how important they were and the weight they carried. 8 months later, standing in the busy airport terminal, everything finally became clear to me. After completing my freshman year of college, those words echoed with a new meaning I was now ready to face. Everything at home seemed out of place, as if someone had moved all the furniture while I was gone. The guest room where Grandpa stayed was suddenly locked even during the day. "It's for his safety," Mom explained. Dad added, "He needs his rest." Yet I noticed how the hallway grew unnervingly silent, how they no longer invited him to join dinner, how they became uneasy whenever visitors inquired about him. He was vanishing from our family like an old picture left too long in the sunlight, fading until only faint outlines remained. I resisted quietly in the little ways I could. I'd leave notes on his nightstand saying, "Good morning, Grandpa. Hope you have a wonderful day, love. Izzy." I would sneak in lemon cookies from the bakery near campus, his favorites. I spent hours sitting with him even when he gazed out the window and called me Victoria, the name of his late sister. But what hurt the most was not his forgetting. It was their forgetting. One cold February afternoon, I overheard my father talking on the phone in his study. "Yes, I know the lawyer said she has to co-sign, but she's just a kid. We will take care of it." He meant me. After he left, I tiptoed in to look over the documents scattered on his desk. Medical directives, estate planning papers, power of attorney forms. They were not just readying for Grandpa's decline, but preparing to wipe him out of our lives completely. That night at dinner, I confronted them. "He still knows me," I said quietly, my voice firm yet shaking. Quivering with barely restrained feelings, he still smiles whenever I read aloud to him. He still finds humor when I unintentionally char the toast. He remains present. Mom didn't even glance up from her salad. "Emily, you are overreacting. You have always been overly attached. You believe love alone is enough." Dad's voice was detached and clinical. "It isn't. We are doing what is deemed responsible." Responsible. That word pierced through like shattered glass. "You mean convenient?" The quiet that followed felt like frigid water coursing through my veins. From that point on, they shut me out of every discussion about Grandpa's care. I had just returned from lectures to see they had discarded his beloved slippers, given away his books, and replaced the old kettle he used for his afternoon tea ritual. Minimalism, Mom said cheerfully when I inquired about the missing belongings. But to me, it resembled an eraser. Then came the news that altered everything. "We are going to South Africa," Dad announced one evening at dinner. His grin was too broad, his gaze too guarded. A family trip. One last moment together before... He did not complete the sentence, yet we all grasped its meaning. I looked at Grandpa sitting beside me, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on the tablecloth, a habit when he was absorbing information. He didn't seem to grasp the conversation, but when I whispered close to him, "Would you like to go on an adventure, Grandpa?" He met my gaze and winked. It was subtle, yet it was unmistakably him. So I consented to the journey. Not because I trusted that their motives were genuine, yet something deep inside me told a different story. This was not merely a holiday, it was a challenge, and I had to be present when they stumbled. We departed for the airport just before dawn on a Tuesday morning. The sky was still painted with hues of orange and pink, while the air held a sharp March chill, blended with the metallic aroma of jet fuel. Grandpa wore his navy cardigan, the sweater he liked to call his travel sweater, buttoned unevenly and hanging loosely on his shrinking frame. In one hand he gripped a framed photo of Grandma, and with the other, he held my wrist tightly. Dad kept glancing at his watch. Mom constantly checked her reflection in a compact mirror, and I kept searching Grandpa's eyes, hoping to see that he grasped what was happening. Sitting in the Lexus's back seat, I leaned close and whispered, "Are you excited about our trip, Grandpa?" He did not answer directly but stared out the window, softly humming a tune I almost recognized. Maybe an old military song, or a lullaby, I thought to myself. His thumb gently followed the edge of Grandma's photograph. I spoke softly again. "We're going somewhere warm. There might even be elephants." He turned to me then, focusing his gaze with some effort. "You will become a wonderful teacher one day, Victoria." I did not correct him. He always called me Victoria when he was scared. The airport felt like chaos, endless queues, buzzing fluorescent lights, the relentless noise of boarding calls, and wheels rolling on the floor. "Mom?" She drew me aside close to the coffee stand and said, "Emily, get coffee for your father and me. It needs to be strong. We will need it for this flight." I glanced back at Grandpa and asked, "What about him?" She replied that he was fine, and began walking away, assuring me, "We will be right back." Dad helped Grandpa find seats in the quietest corner of the terminal near a big window overlooking the runway. Grandpa sat obediently, clutching Grandma's photo and softly humming a tune I could not quite recognize. My father bent down, placed a hand on Grandpa's shoulder, and spoke slowly and clearly, "Just sit here. We will go check in and come directly back." His words echoed through my mind like a heavy stone dropped deep into a well. I remained motionless, the coffee order only half formed on my lips, watching my parents walk away calmly and confidently without glancing back. 5 minutes slipped by, then 10. Grandpa waited patiently in his chair, trusting, occasionally scanning the crowd with hopeful eyes. 15 minutes. My heart thudded wildly inside my chest like a caged bird. 20 minutes. A cold, terrible feeling settled heavily in my stomach. With trembling hands, I approached the check-in desk and nervously asked the woman behind the counter if the Thompson party had already checked in for the flight to South Africa. She typed quickly and then nodded, confirming that they were all checked in and through security. Boarding was due to start in about 20 minutes. My breath caught at the words. All of them? According to the system, yes. I stepped away from the counter feeling numb. They were not coming back. They had never planned to return. About 100 feet away, My grandfather sat alone among a crowd of strangers, waiting for those who had already boarded their flight to a new beginning. A future that did not include him. He was confused by what was happening and had no clue where he was or why the familiar faces had disappeared. All he knew was that they had told him, "Wait for us." And so he waited because that is what loyal people do. That is how love appears when it has been betrayed, but remains unaware of it. I do not remember deciding to run. My body just moved, guided by instinct as reason seemed to vanish. The sounds of rolling suitcases and departure announcements became mere background noise as I dashed back to the quiet corner where my grandfather sat. "Grandpa," I breathed, dropping to my knees beside him. "It's me. It's Emily Thompson." His eyes searched my face, recognition flickering faintly like a fragile flame in the breeze. "Victoria," he whispered, voice dry and unsure. "It's all right," I said, taking his cold hands in mine. "I am here. You are not alone." He looked around the terminal, confused and growing restless. "Where did your father go? He said he would return soon. Am I supposed to go somewhere? Did I forget something important?" The questions felt like sharp blows to my chest. My throat was sore and my eyes stung with tears that refused to fall. "No, Grandpa. You are not meant to go anywhere. You need to stay with me. That is all." He held my hands tighter, and I could sense his body trembling. I was terrified, Emily. I had no idea what to do. People kept passing by as I waited desperately, but not a single person returned. I wanted to shout, not at him, never at him, but at the strangers who walked away without a second thought. Those who had already packed their suitcases, printed their boarding passes, and made peace with leaving behind the man who once lifted them on his shoulders, taught them to ride their bikes, and stayed awake all night when they had fevers. I stood up carefully and helped him to rise. "Come on, Grandpa. We need to go." He hesitated, looking nervously towards the security gates. "Are we going on a trip?" "Yes," I replied, wrapping his scarf tenderly around his neck, but not the one they were expecting. As we made our way toward the exit, I heard my name being called, Eslaw. Turning, I saw my mother near the escalator, her heels echoing on the shiny floor, her mascara smeared, phone gripped in her hand like a weapon. Dad stood behind her, silent and rigid. "Emily, get back here immediately," Mom snapped. I tightened my hold on Grandpa's arm. "No, he doesn't even remember where he is," she hissed, stepping forward. "He needs professional help. You don't understand what you're doing." "I know exactly what I am doing," I said calmly, the first steady voice I'd had all day. "I'm not leaving him here like forgotten baggage in some waiting room." Finally, Dad spoke, his tone low and sharp. "You are causing a scene. Consider how this must appear." I almost laughed, yet the sound that escaped was sharp and fractured. "He is your father." Those words lingered between us like a final judgment. For a brief moment, none of us moved. The chaos of the airport surrounded us, but our small group felt suspended in time. Then I spoke softly but distinctly. "You abandoned him." Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad's jaw clenched tightly. "We are finished here," I said, turning toward the exit. "Emily Thompson, if you leave now," Dad started. Yet I was already walking away, assisting Grandpa as he weaved through other passengers toward the sliding glass doors leading to freedom. The chilly morning breeze hit us sharply, but it felt purer than the recycled air inside. I flagged down the first cab I noticed and helped Grandpa into the back seat, his hands trembling. We drove silently for several miles, the airport fading in the rear view like a nightmare melting into daylight. It was not until we arrived at the Greyhound station that I exhaled fully, breathing deeply for what seemed like the first time in many hours. "Where are we headed?" Grandpa asked softly, his eyes cloudy but filled with trust. I pulled out my phone and flipped through contacts until I found the number I had saved many months earlier, the one I never expected to use. Martha Sullivan, Grandpa's younger sister, my great-aunt, the only relative in our large family who still sent birthday cards with personal handwritten messages. She lived on a modest piece of land outside Holton, Kansas, and had reached out to me shortly after Christmas, concerned about Grandpa. "If anything ever happens, Emily," she had said, "you must call me. Do not let them hide him away where he will be forgotten." I dialed her number with shaky hands. She picked up on the second ring. "Martha, this is Emily. Grandpa needs you. We need you." Her voice trembled. "Oh dear, tell me your location. I'll be there waiting." I secured 2 bus tickets for the earliest trip to Kansas. The station was almost deserted. Just a few other passengers preparing to depart for places that likely held deep meaning to them. I helped Grandpa into a seat by the window, wrapped my scarf around his shoulders, and let him rest his head against my arm. He was asleep before the bus engine started, his breathing calm and even. As we left Omaha behind, I watched the scenery shift through the window. The urban landscape gradually gave way to farmland, suburbs fading into the vast open sky. I no longer felt adrift. For the first time in my life, I was not following the carefully crafted plans of my parents. I was making my own decisions. That choice, though daunting, felt like returning to a place I belonged. The bus arrived at Holton's small station just as the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon. The quiet was almost unnatural after the noise of airports and city traffic, yet I embraced the calm like a comforting hug. Standing on the platform was a strong woman wearing a denim jacket stood with her silver hair tied back in a simple ponytail, holding a piece of cardboard that read, "Henry plus Elo" in uneven black marker. "Martha Sullivan," she said, as she dropped the sign the instant she noticed us. "Oh, Hank," she exclaimed, hurrying forward with tears already rolling down her weathered cheeks. Grandpa blinked at her, then smiled with more recognition than I had expected. "Maddie," he said quietly. She laughed through her tears. "You still remember that old nickname, huh?" He reached out for her hand with surprising steadiness. "You grew old and you didn't?" she teased, embracing him in a hug that seemed to revive something in both of them. For the very first time in days, I felt myself truly calm. We drove along narrow roads bordered by open fields, extending endlessly beneath the largest sky I had ever seen. Martha's house was located at the town's edge, a simple 2-bedroom with peeling white paint and a broad porch that looked like it had witnessed many years of stories. There were no forms, no interviews, no talk of burden or obligation, just warm soup, fresh sheets, and a kind of quiet that enveloped you like a cozy blanket. Not the cold, judging silence I had grown accustomed to, but something that felt like genuine acceptance. That first evening, I sat on the porch while Grandpa rested inside, finally at peace. Martha brought out 2 mugs of chamomile tea and settled into the rocking chair next to me, her joints gently creaking with the movement. The old wood creaked underfoot. "You made the right choice," she whispered, her voice heavy with the wisdom that comes from years of living. "Even if they do not understand it now, especially if they never do." I nodded, though I had not shared the entire story yet. It was still too painful to express fully. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need," she continued. "This house might be small, but it has space for those who truly see one another." I did not shed any tears then. Exhaustion had drained me of that ability. Yet something inside me finally relaxed after months of tension. I gazed up at the stars, clearer and more brilliant than I had ever witnessed in the city, and I felt as if they were truly watching me back rather than ignoring me. During the following weeks, I found a rhythm I did not realize I was missing. I assisted with grocery shopping and meal preparation, learned how to care for Martha's tiny vegetable garden, and took Grandpa for slow walks around the neighborhood when the weather was kind. He did not always remember where we were going, but he always held my hand. Sometimes he joyfully pointed out birds or blossoms. On some days, he called me Victoria, and on others, Izzy. Occasionally, rare and precious moments arrived like gifts. He looked at me with perfectly clear eyes and said, "Emily Thompson," as if seeing me anew, for the first time. Those fleeting instants outweighed everything else. I began journaling, not for any assignment or class, but just to hold on to memories. I recorded the things that mattered. Grandpa often spoke about the meals Martha prepared and the way the sunrise appeared through the kitchen window. For the very first time in my life, I found myself in a place where cherishing memories was not only permitted but welcomed. By the time spring arrived, I had signed up for a part-time nursing assistant course at the nearby community college. This choice was not premeditated, yet something inside me had changed, like a compass finally directing me toward true purpose. Taking care of Grandpa no longer felt like a burden but rather a legacy to embrace. One warm afternoon toward the end of spring, I was pushing Grandpa's wheelchair around Martha's tiny backyard when he suddenly looked at me, clearer and more aware than he had been in many weeks. "You're doing well, Izzy," he said with a sparkle in his eyes. "Really well." I knelt down beside him, deeply moved by the gift of his lucidity. "I wish I could have done more sooner." He gently shook his head with intention. "You did the one thing that truly mattered. You stayed." Grandpa passed away on a Tuesday morning in early summer. I found him seated in his favorite chair by the window, hands resting calmly on the quilt Martha had crafted, with soft jazz playing quietly in the background. His framed picture of Grandma sat nearby on the table, placed exactly where he had set it each morning for many months. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep while enjoying his favorite melody. I did not cry right away. I just sat beside him, held his still warm hand, and whispered, "You can rest now. Grandpa, I will remember the rest for you." 7 days following the funeral, I made the trip back to Omaha. It was not out of a desire for reconciliation, but because I needed to close that chapter for myself. Standing on the porch of my childhood home, I pressed the doorbell and waited. The house seemed somehow smaller, as if it had turned into a stage set after the curtains had dropped. The door opened to Mom, her eyes wide with astonishment, and something that might have been relief. She looked as though sleep had eluded her. Dad appeared behind her, arms folded, not in defiance but in fatigue. I heard Mom say softly, "About your grandfather." I nodded. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by those who loved him. She looked down at her hands. "We never intended for things to unfold the way they did." "Yes, you did," I said quietly, free of spite. "You meant to leave him at that airport, and you would have done the same to me if I had not chosen a different path." Dad stepped forward. "He did not remember you most days toward the end. It was not personal." "It was never about what he recalled," I replied. "It was about what I refused to forget." As I turned to leave, Mom gripped my wrist. "Emily, will you come home?" I looked at her then, truly saw her, not as the poised society wife I had grown up with, but as a woman who had constructed her entire existence around control and appearances, and who now stood at the empty heart of that creation, finally grasping what it had cost her. "I am. Home," I whispered softly. "In Kansas, surrounded by people who loved me without me having to prove myself." Back in Holton, I returned to my studies, my patients, and the porch where Grandpa used to sit, quietly watching life unfold. I kept his photograph on my wall right next to my nursing certificate once I finally attained it. Each night before drifting off, I murmured to the stars, I didn't let go. Because in choosing Henry, I had chosen myself. I chose love instead of loyalty, honesty over ease, staying instead of walking away. That decision, though scary and uncertain, brought me exactly where I was meant to be. Often those who should love us without limits end up teaching us about conditions instead. But if we are fortunate, we also discover that love does not require earning. It simply needs to be acknowledged, respected, and fiercely defended. That is a lesson worth holding on to. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, share it with anyone who might need courage to embrace love instead of comfort. And remember to comment and subscribe for more tales about the moments that shape us into who we are destined to become. Sometimes our boldest acts of rebellion turn into our deepest expressions of love.